Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today on this webinar, Build a Better Website, build a better homepage and see better results. So today what we're going to do is hopefully show you how to improve your homepage, and by doing so, hopefully improve the number of visitors you have or increase the number of visitors you have to your site and improve the conversions that you have on your site. So let's talk about the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. So firstly, we'll just talk briefly about the homepage basics, what it is, what's its function. Then we'll do a brief overview of how you can audit your existing homepage, just to find out, who's visiting it, what issues they're experiencing, if any, what's stopping traffic coming to your site, essentially. Then we'll talk about planning your homepage. So setting some goals for you and your potential visitors, what content you need to put on there and calls to action. We'll then discuss what you need to do to build the homepage after you've planned it. And we'll touch on some things we can also do to optimize the SEO and the conversions on your homepage. So, why is the homepage important? Well, there's lots of reasons why you should really focus on your homepage, and I'll go through a number of them now. So, the homepage is the most likely place that people are going to enter your site. Not only that, it's the most likely page that will rank. So people will find your site through your homepage. Not always, but in the lion's share of cases, it will definitely be the primary way that people enter your site from an organic web perspective. It's also the page that people make when they visit your page as to whether they're going to continue, whether they trust you, whether it's relevant to their particular scenario. And that's why we talk sometimes about above the fold, and I'm going to focus a lot on above the fold today. There's also the 7-second rule that people talk about, and this is where you need to convince the visitor in that 7 seconds what it is that you offer, why they should care about it, and what they should do next. The homepage is also an important tool, the most important tool for you to move your prospects through your sales lead marketing funnel. So whatever funnel you have set up, whatever objective you're trying to achieve with that funnel, the homepage is the starting point, or the landing page in most cases, depending on how you've got it set up. And we're not talking about a particular campaign. This is just general visitors. They're going to land on your page. You need to have a funnel or a marketing process to ensure that you capture them as a lead at the very least, which is the next point. So it's an important place to capture leads. Now, a lead can just be subscribe to our blog, subscribe to our newsletter, whatever it might be, but it's an important place to capture those leads. And also through, of course, retargeting using the Facebook Pixel or Google Tag Manager at a later stage. And the homepage should do this. It should be, can I help you? It should answer this question. Can I help you find what you're looking for, essentially? Now, it sounds very obvious, but you'll find that in a lot of cases, it doesn't answer that question. And it's often because we're not taking the user's experience into account. What are they looking for? Who are they? And what are they looking for? And how can you best address that need? Rather than maybe talking about your business, about your capabilities and that sort of thing, it should be more about what are the client's needs? Who are they, firstly? What's their need? And how can you address that need? Okay, so we'll just talk briefly about some of the homepage elements, some of the things you should have on your homepage. So, of course, there's your top menu, the main menu, and it should include your logo, and it should include your basic navigation. When I say basic, I'm talking about navigation that's going to, if you like, guide your visitor towards an objective that you want them to achieve or you want to achieve. And with that, you want your primary call to action and your top far right side of your top menu if you can. There's also the headline. So the headline we'll talk about shortly, and the subheadline if needed. There's the call to action, primary and secondary. So what do you want them to achieve? You know, you might not always get them to take the primary action, so maybe you can have a secondary call to action as well. The hero shot, the supporting imagery that you use is very important. We'll talk about that as well. Then below the fold, so most of that so far is really above the fold. Then below the fold, you'd probably talk about, you know, how it works. So what steps they need to take, features and benefits. It could also be what, you know, who it's used for. So what sort of personas, this is where you bring your personas in, or your avatars, you know, what sort of use they would derive from your particular product. And then there's things like trust builders, so it could be testimonials or case studies, for example. And then the most, not the most important, but the last is the footer, which is where you put some of that navigation that you don't necessarily need in your top menu navigation. But it's also a place where you put some important navigation. So some of your, you know, legal documentation, your terms and conditions, your privacy policy, that sort of thing. Okay, so we'll go through some of this. We will focus primarily though on the above the fold section, but not only. Okay, so that's some of the elements you should have on your homepage, and we'll go through some of these. Now there's different types of home pages as well. So depending on what you're trying to achieve. Now we'll be focused primarily on this type of homepage, which is a transactional homepage. It's got a clear call to action, and you know, it's obviously focusing on getting someone to take an action to get them to the next step. There's also categorical homepages. So these are often just, if you like, landing pages which will divide the personas or get the personas to do one thing or another. So in this particular case, they're either buying a car or they're selling a car. So, you know, at the end of the day, though, they're going to land on a transactional homepage once they've made their decision. And the third type is more of a consumption type homepage. So you'll often see this in news and media type websites. So we're, like I said, we're going to focus on the transactional type. Now, there are some things you might have noticed. If you go to the chat in your Zoom app, you'll see there's some links in there. Now, some of these links we'll need throughout this webinar, or you can use later on, because we've only got an hour, so I don't expect you to sort of complete all of this, but just so that you've got these documentation, the documentation there, and you can complete some of this. So there's 3 particular bits of information, and then a folder to all of the resources, because there's other things included in there other than those 3 resources. Is also the presentation and some other handy tools you might want to use. So the first thing I was hoping you might download is this 7-point audit. So it's a way to audit your homepage and give yourself a score out of 4, and overall it adds up to 100. But basically looking at each section of your homepage and giving yourself a score maximum out of 4. So you might want to just download that and do that in your own time, so you can see where you need to put, you know, most of your effort. So there's the link there on the screen, but you can also get it from the chat function as well. Okay, so the first thing, so basically what we're onto here is now doing an audit of the website. So the first thing you should probably do is this homepage audit. Understand, you know, where you need to put a bit of effort in. But in addition to that, I would recommend some other things you should probably do. So the first thing is to understand, if you've got an existing website, of course, and you've got visitors, hopefully you've got Google Analytics set up, because Google Analytics is going to tell you a lot of things, very valuable things. So let's just talk about some of those things. So it's going to tell you who your visitors are, you know, what they're doing on your site, and potentially what issues they may be facing, if any. Now, if you don't have analytics, then I would recommend that you go to analytics.google.com and open an account and get that set up on your website. because I'm just going to show you some of the things you'll get from this platform. So the first thing you'll get, once you've got a little bit of history anyway, because it needs to gather some data, you'll come to the home page and it'll provide a range of information. So I'll just show you that. So on the home page here, it's going to show you things like, you know, how many users you had over a given period and what sort of revenue you generated and the conversion rate, that sort of thing. And you can change that window smaller or bigger to give you a bigger picture view, if you like. Other things that will tell you are things like who are active, how many users are active on your website right now and what pages they're accessing. Also little insights or tidbits of information you might find useful and you might implement on your own site. Then things like, you know, where are your users coming from and what time of the day do they visit your website and what sources or channels are they coming from? So is it social, or is it, you know, or search engine, direct, or other sources? And you can tunnel down more and find out exactly where they're coming from. So Facebook, paid ads, for example, organic search results, and you can get more detail from that as well. So it's really telling you a lot of information here. Also, what device they're using. So in this case, 82% of the visitors are on a mobile, and what pages they're visiting and how your visitors or users are trending over time. So very useful information. But so this is more about how your users are engaging with you, but you can also get some very useful audience information. And I'll just show you that now. So we'll just look at demographics for a start. So let's look at the age groups here. And you can see that, you know, different age groups, 25 to 34-year-olds are 25% of the audience. But also, this is a screen recording, so I can pause this. I just want to show you some things that are really important, that if you have this analytics set up, you should take notice of. And one of them would be this bounce rate, for example. So a bounce rate will often tell you that a bounce is where someone comes to your website and then they seemingly leave for no apparent reason without doing anything. And so that's obviously not a good thing. And it's often because of some reason, usually performance related issues. So they might be on a mobile device, they're loading your site, it's just loading too slowly. They decide to exit and go somewhere else. So this one here, you can see that the bounce rate is quite low on some of them, though it's a bit higher than others. So older age bracket and the 35 to 44-year-olds. I would just take notice of this because what I'm pointing out to you here is very, very low. And you'll be, you know, I often come across bounce rates of 50, 60, 70, even 90% on some websites. So it is an important number to understand, because that might just be a performance issue on your homepage that's just preventing a lot of traffic landing there. They don't want to engage because it's too slow. So that's just, you know, some really important information, and also about how the different users, you know, behave differently. You can also see by gender. Now this one's not particularly interesting because it's mostly a female-oriented site, but I'll just show you some other things you can look at here. And this is really the behavior of individual users. So I'm just going to go down to behavior. Sorry, just a little bit further down, actually, user flow. So how they flow through your website. And you can't see this any other way than through analytics. So you can see how what pages they land on, and then from there, what subsequent pages they go to. And you can choose different types of variables for the user. So what country they're from, what device they're on, what region they're in. But I find more interesting is really the behavior flow, under behavior on analytics. And you can choose the source that, you know, where are they coming from? So for example, Facebook or Google or other social platforms, referrals, and then you can see what pages they're landing on. So I'm just going to pause this for a second and just talk you through this. So this is showing you that 1.5K visitors came from Facebook, and they went to these particular pages, products and different collections. Google, there were slightly less, 1.2, and they went to completely almost different pages. They went to the home page, and to the products page and to some other pages. So as you can see, Facebook and Google alone, they're going to completely different pages. So that's something that's quite interesting to note. The other thing to note is that this these drop-offs here, the red arrow, so in this particular instance, there were nearly 5,000 sessions, but nearly half of them dropped off. That's often the bounce rate I was talking about before. Could be other reasons. They just decided they had other things to do, but you can see there's, and if that was particularly high, you'd probably on a particular page, especially if it's your home page, you might want to know what that reason is. Is it that you've got a big video that's slowing everything down for your visitors, for example? And just if you want to do, you could sort of isolate certain sections of this. So for example, I could say I want to see just Google visitors, and you can just view traffic from that segment just to see how they behave. You can see all the pages they go to and that sort of thing. So really useful information. And what this is telling you is, one, who your visitors are, and two, what pages they're going to, you know, and their behavior throughout your website. So I would recommend setting that up if at all possible. Now, I'm just going to move on, because the other thing you could also look at doing, now I suggest doing an SEO audit. Now, SEO audit tells you a few things, not just SEO, but it will tell you things like performance and a range of other things. So I recommend just using maybe a free SEO checker tool. This one is SEOreviewtools.com, their SEO checker. And you put your URL and the word you want to rank for, and you do a performance check, check the results. And these go and do a one-page analysis, just usually of your home page. And then they come back and give you a score. So this one will give you a score out of 100, and then a list of things that maybe you're not doing right, or you could improve upon, basically, or things that you're doing well. And it'll give you a checklist. So I'll just let it scroll down here. So you can see there's a checklist there. I'm just going to show you these briefly, but you need to improve the number and quality of linking websites pointing to your domain. Now, how is this relevant to your homepage? Well, it is relevant because this is about getting traffic to your homepage. And one of the ways that you'll get traffic to your website is doing some SEO optimization around certain keyword phrases, but also about getting links to your particular homepage. So that's people linking to your page, social pages linking to your page, and I'll talk briefly about how you can do that. But then the rest of the things are add an H1 heading to your homepage. Your title tag is too long. Just go through your keyword isn't in your title tag. Your meta description is too long. This all might seem like jargon, but it is, well, it is jargon, but it's relatively easy to fix. So I'll show you how you can do that. So it's one of the ways that you can attract qualified leads, if you like, to your homepage by optimizing it. So that's another thing I would recommend doing. It'll also tell you a range of other things, like how popular your keyword is that you wanted to rank for, things about your search volume for your keywords, the meta title and meta description I talked about before, the title tag. Okay, so very useful tools. I will get into a bit of this detail in a bit more in a second. Okay, so Google Analytics, do that homepage audit if you can. I will get out of this audit section in a minute, but it is important because so you understand where you stand. The other thing is, I highly recommend this, doing a performance audit. So a performance audit is basically tells you how fast or slow your website is. Now, it's difficult for a website owner to do this because your website, if you're accessing it a lot, it'll be cached in your browser. This is called browser cache. And it makes it difficult to test how fast or slow your website is because it always seems fast. So you need to use a performance tool. There's quite a few out there. Google Lighthouse is a one that just sits in your browser as an extension in your Chrome browser. There's webpagetest.org and there's gtmetrics.com. Some of them you'll need like GTmetrics, you need an account, but it is worth doing because I'll just show you as an example why you might want to do this. So this is gtmetrics.com, and I've just chosen randomly a website off the internet, by the way. And this is a fashion e-commerce store. They're called princesshighway.com.au. So I'm guessing they're somewhere on the Princess Highway. And yeah, so I did an analysis of their site. I chose that the user in this case was in Sydney and they are on a 4G mobile device. So you can choose those settings. It only allows you to choose Sydney for Australia, but I chose Sydney, and you can choose all different types of settings from fast broadband. I'm choosing, because of the product type, 4G mobile, because that's the most likely. And it'll go off and do an analysis of your site. Now, I guarantee you, well, maybe not guarantee, but the owners of this site probably don't know the performance of their website. Hopefully they're not watching this particular webinar, but anyway, so it comes back with a performance report, and in this particular case came back with a F for fail, and you can see the performance 12%, so very poor performance, and this is likely to cause very high bounce rates, and you end up saying, why aren't I getting the traffic to my site? And it's because of some of these things. So I'm just going to pause it here. You can see here, this shows you how the site loads, and there's a bit of a delay here with the server, and then it's trying to load all the stuff that's in that first above the fold section. So there's a background image, there's a pop-up, and by the time all of that loads, it's taken 9.5 seconds, which is way past the 4 or whatever second rule it is meant to be, to, you know, where people decide I'm going to go somewhere else because it's too slow. So doing this, and it will tell you, you know, for example, you shouldn't have a pop-up in the above the fold section. You should at least wait until the website loads, because it's going to slow the loading of your website. Try not to have video or slideshows. You want to try and have maybe a single image if you can. And this will show you here. So there's one, this is all JavaScript. I'm not sure why there's so much JavaScript there, 420K. It'll also show you a waterfall here of how it loads. And it'll just show you things like, you know, some of your large files and why that's maybe slowing your site down. So there's a 215 kilobyte image, for example, which is way too big. So, you know, these are some of the things a performance report will tell you. Just show you a couple of others. There's a JPEG there. Maybe not. So, you know, that's way too big. It doesn't need to be that big. Okay, so performance is an important thing to do. So you've started off, you've done that 7-point audit I suggested, that's in the chat. In the chat there is a link. You've looked at your analytics. You've maybe done an SEO audit and a performance audit. So now you've got a bit of a feel for areas that might need to be fixed up potentially, but also areas that are slowing down the site and maybe making people not want to stay. Okay, so that's a good baseline. Now let's talk about how we might plan the homepage. So I've given you a homepage planner and a checklist in the chat section there. You might want to just download that in your own time. I'll show you briefly what it looks like. So it's basically a little document broken into 3 stages. There's the plan, the build, and the launch stage. So the plan stage we'll talk about briefly. It's about setting your goals, defining your customer avatar or who your audience is that you're talking to, creating content around that. what sort of content you want on your homepage, and then determining what your calls to action are going to be, your primary one in particular. Then we can talk about building it. So this is about designing the menu, the headlines, the background image, the call to action, and then product and service breakdown, who is it for sections, call to actions, the footer, design comes in sort of at the end there. And then we also, even though I don't talk about it very much, retargeting is something you should probably have set up. And then there's the launch, and we'll talk briefly about that. So let's talk about planning the homepage and your goals. So like I said, I don't expect you to, to have this all completed by the time we finish this webinar. There's just not enough time. So hopefully you just get some ideas. Maybe you can download the presentation after this and some of the resources I talk about and do it in your own time. So your goal should be based on what you want to achieve from your website, not just your homepage, but like I said, your homepage is where they're going to enter. So it's important about thinking about what do you want from your website. And it should be quite specific. It should be a smart, measurable goal. So, specific but measurable, and something that you can do achievable within the timeframes. So it might be that you want to increase sales. It might be you want to increase membership, just want to increase awareness, which is a bit vague. But you should also be quite specific in terms of some metrics you might want to use so that you can measure your performance of achieving your goals, for example. So it could be conversion rate, it could be increasing traffic, decreasing bounce rate, for example. It could be any number of those. Then this is really important. This is about understanding who you're talking to. So who is your audience and what are their goals? And so as part of this, I'll give you a link to that in a second. There is the avatar template, and you can sort of work on who your prime target markets are and what their needs are, what their pain points are, and what their touch points are. Because, you've got to think, not everyone that's coming to your website is ready to buy yet. Depending on where they are in their journey, they might just be at a point where they're doing research or they're considering different options. So, this is where you need to think about different types of content for, each of their needs, depending on where they are in that journey. So that comes next. So the content you need to engage those visitors and to address their needs. And then a call to action. So a call to action, you really need to think this through, because, if they're first-time visitors to your website, it's probably unlikely that they, a buy now call to action is the one that they're most likely going to convert them. It might be at this point that you want to either get them to subscribe to your newsletter or to a mailing list, get them to view some products, for example, or your product categories or service offerings, request a quote, register for a webinar, something like that. So these are 4 things you really need to think about. And these are all, not only, 3 of them anyway, are really, well, all of them are very, very important for the homepage, but in particular for above the fold section of your homepage. So let's just talk about the customer, who you're talking to here. Now, I'm sure you've seen these before, but you should really give it a go and really try and identify who your perfect sort of customer avatar is. Put a name and a face to these people. Really importantly, though, you need to identify what are their challenges and what are their pain points, because this becomes really important when you're trying to write copy and headlines, because you need to know who they are, what their challenges are, and how you can address their challenges and their pain points through your particular service or product. So if you don't know that, you're sort of stabbing in the dark. You don't really know what they're trying to achieve, who they are, and also the touch points. So where are they finding you? Is it search, blogs, emails, social, some other publication, word of mouth, all of these different touch points become important, because that's then how you then build your content plan around them at these different touch points. So you can download that too, and you can have one per avatar, because you might have just one type of client, but probably not. Really give that some thought about how many different types of customer types you have. So audience clarity is very, very important in doing everything from here on in. Okay, so we're going to talk mostly about the above the fold section. So that section that's visible, first visible when they load your site. And it's going to vary depending on what device they're on. A mobile versus a very large screen, they're going to have a different above the fold. But it doesn't matter, the message is equally as important. Now, so we're going to just briefly touch on two rules that I spoke about very briefly. So there's the 4-second rule. And really, this is all about trying to get your website to load quickly. So to do that, you need to think about optimizing the images and what's loading above the fold. For example, do you need a pop-up right there and then? Probably not. You can wait until the site's loaded, and you can have the pop-up embedded in your site, or pop up later on when they're scrolling down the page. So 4-second rule is important. The 7-second rule is about answering that question. What is it? Why should I care? And what do I need to do next? They're the 3 things you really want answered at this particular stage. Okay, so because this is the most significant component of your homepage, we are going to focus a little bit on this, because if you don't, what you'll find is you'll just not have potentially engaged visitors. You're not going to have them scroll down. So this is very important part of the whole homepage. And the first part of that is to craft your core message. So try and identify what your core message is. So your core message is going to answer those 3 things I said before. So what is it? Why should I care? And what should I do next? And your core message is comprised of these 3 things. So your headline, your call to action, and your imagery, essentially. And it could be a sub-headline as well. And your headline should try and provide a solution to your clients or your persona's pain points, so they achieve their desired outcome. So this is where you need to understand a bit more about them. So what are their pain points? What are they trying to achieve? You can then put some headlines together that identify your persona, their pain points, their desired outcomes, and how you're going to help them achieve those. And I've touched on this already, but you need to clarify who your audience is, and then you need to pick your primary persona, your key 80-20 rule. So which one are you going to get the most bang for your buck, and craft the core message for those. You can bring in the other persona later, but just for this particular example, we're just going to choose that one primary persona and a primary call to action. So this is important, and we will talk about this, but you need to really think about what is your call to action. Because if this is where you say, buy now, it's probably too early, because they haven't yet decided if they're even trusting you. So just give that a little bit of thought. We will talk briefly about that in a second. And just be aware of where your audience is in their journey. So they may have visited many other websites before they got to yours. And really, there's usually 3 things they're trying to identify. It's 1, a solution to a problem. So they've identified the problem, they have a problem, they're now looking for solutions to that problem. Or they've identified solutions and they're now considering different solutions, different approaches to that. or they've decided on a solution and they're looking to purchase. Now, if they're new to your website, they're probably going to be in that trying to identify a problem, a solution to a problem stage, I would have thought. This is really where your knowledge of your customers comes into play. But really trying to identify a solution to a problem would be the key, I would have thought. So given that and keeping that in mind, let's look at some potential headlines you could craft that's going to maybe add to that core message. So I'm using some real examples here, and I just want to show you how these headlines have been generated. So transform your sales team into a revenue generating machine. So what they've said here is transform your existing asset into a known desired end result. So if you know your persona, you know what they're trying to achieve, you maybe know what their existing asset or their pain point might be, and you can turn that into a headline. Competitive intelligence for busy marketers. So this is desired end result for avatar. So you know your persona's end result, what they're trying to achieve, their desired end result, and you know who they are. There's your headline. Build, publish, and A/B test landing pages without IT. Accomplish desired end result without known bottleneck, roadblock, pain point. So, you know, this really where you need to maybe put a bit of effort into. And by the way, in my resources, I'll give you all of these. These headlines all come from Digital Marketer, and I've got all of their sort of headline swipe files you can sort of get some ideas from. And, you know, just for your own particular homepage. Here's another one. So make your retailers better marketers. So this is really make your constituent group, whoever your constituent group is, better, or better at a meaningful core skill or benefit. Okay, so like I said, give that some thought. Really, it comes from your persona worksheet that you've put some effort into. Hopefully, this will then sort of flesh out some of these headlines you might want to use. And I've got that reference guide you can also use as well. Okay, now let's just talk about the hero shot. So, you know, hero shots, just touch on this briefly. So, you know, well, let's just talk about this firstly. So your hero shot should just, most important, it should look professional. Number one rule. But you could make it better by showing the product, for example. So what is it is addressed in that way. A better way to do it though would show the consumer or the persona as the hero in their desired after state. Bad would be something distracting or just not relevant and egotistical. So this is where you're talking about yourself, and sometimes that's relevant if that's your brand. If your brand is you and you're the product, a consultant or a mentor, for example, that's fine. But a picture of your office building or your cars, for example, maybe not a good idea. Then there's some other things to think about. So do you use just a hero? Do you use an image? It could be a full screen or it could just be a smaller image. Do you use slides? Do you use a video? Now, personally speaking, having worked on lots of these particular issues for clients in the past, you know, images are, I think, the best if you can get the right type of image that portrays your particular, you know, what your core message essentially. Slides are great if you want to show, you know, more than one product or one message, but they have an impact on your performance. They really do slow websites down, particularly on mobile devices. So if your users are primarily on mobile devices, and even worse, if they're in regional locations as well, where maybe mobile coverage isn't the best, then you should avoid, in my personal humble opinion, you should avoid slideshows. Video, really, you really need a tiny 10-second loop at the very most, video just looping. So if that's getting your primary message across, then that might be good. But you also need to be aware that unless you've got the grunt with your website hosting, that will also slow down the performance. Even a hero shot like this can slow down the performance if you haven't optimized it. And when I say optimized, it should be definitely under 100K, but I'm thinking 60, 70, 80K maximum. So relatively small. Then you've got, so this is showing a client or a persona as the hero in their desired after state. They've solved their problem. The headline says, "We help persona achieve desired end result." There might be some subheading or text there to put some more meat on the bones, and then you can have your call to action. It could be a primary, should be the primary call to action, but you could potentially have the secondary call to action there. So this is where the customer is seeing themselves. I also have a background for many years in the tourism industry, and this is what a lot of the tourism organizations will tell you to do when you're developing your material for tourism destinations. It's about putting their customer in the picture. So when they're looking at that picture, they're seeing themselves on holiday in that beautiful resort on that beach. Same thing applies to your product. Okay, so think about the hero image and what you could potentially use there. You can get these hero images from image libraries if you need to, but really think about using a high quality image library like Unsplash or Pexels or something like that. Now, the call to action. So I talked briefly about this. So the call to action should be something, the primary action that you want them to take. Or primarily, it could also be the secondary action as well. So you could have two calls to action, but the primary action you want them to take. Now, this should be very easy to understand. Start the quiz, it tells them, if you read about what he's trying to say there, start the quiz. And by the way, in this particular case, this man is the product. That's why he's got his face on there. He mentors people and tells them how to earn lots and lots of money. So start the quiz, it tells them what you need to do. He's asking me to take a quiz, fine. Very easy to understand, but it gets them closer, or me closer as a visitor, for example, to the end result, which is a client, but not necessarily yet ready to close me because I'm still at that discovery phase, if you like. So that call to action should be something relatively simple. It could also be, sorry, I do have another slide there for some reason that's not showing. It could also be a scroll down button. So learn more, for example, or it could be, to the next phase, on your page, the next section on your page. Okay, so all we've talked about so far is above the fold. Now what we'll do is just talk briefly about below the fold. Okay, so what do we want to do below the fold? So let's say I was working for a company, developing a website for a company called Business Station, and I wanted to build a website for them. This might be something along the lines of what it would include on the website. So I've shown you, there's no navigation on there, so excuse that. But other than that, you've seen the above the fold. There's some logos there as well, brands that we work with. But sorry, I'm just going to go back a second there. So this here is about building trust. So it could be clients you've worked with, media mentions, it could be brands that you sell, could be certifications, for example, that you have, could be a range of different things. Doesn't necessarily have to be right there, by the way. Okay, then what you really want to do is have something along the lines of how it works. So how your solution helps the client meet their objective. So how it works could be a step process. It could just be simple definition of how your solution is a solution for their pain point. Then this is where you might get into a little bit more about your personas. So how does it address their particular needs or where they are in their journey? So solution to need for persona, address pain point 1 for persona, address pain point 2 for persona, and some more call to actions. You could also put an explainer video in down here, to explain more about what it is, rather than say, above the fold. This is a good opportunity to put that in. And this is where you can also bring in your other personas. So if you have more than one persona, you could bring them in here and talk about why it's good for them. You could have here maybe a secondary call to action. It might be sign up to the newsletter, some testimonials about your team. You could also have case studies there, depending on your type of business. And then your primary call to action. Why would you have the primary call to action there? Just so they've gotten to the bottom of your page. They don't want to have to scroll all the way back to the top to click on that button. So you give them the opportunity at the bottom to do that. You can also have a contact us page. Could be a social feed page there as well, like Instagram, depending on what you want to do. Okay, so that's a little bit of a summary. So these are some of the things you want to include below the fold. So above the fold, remember, it was, what is it? Why should I care? What do I do next? Below the fold is more about how does it work and who is it for? So these are the things you should try and address below the fold. But you can also include additional things. So it could be things like a calls to action, like I had on that example before, primary and secondary calls to action. It could be, this is where you include or introduce different product categories that you offer, different product services that you offer, different service categories that you offer, for example. Like the example I showed you, could be testimonials or case studies, and lower to the bottom, maybe social feeds, maybe blog posts, recent news. And then of course at the bottom, you've got your footer, which is really important. So how does it work? It really depends on your particular product and how you want to do this. It doesn't specifically have to be a how does it work section, but it should explain how your solution solves their particular pain point, how it gets them to their desired after state. So you can do that in a number of ways. Here's one example. You would have seen these many times when you visited other websites. And yeah, even though this isn't a good example because it's actually showing you paddings, I just wanted to show you how Contiki do it too. So you can see they've identified their persona and how it makes them. So it's connecting young travelers to the time of their lives. So that's their headline. And then who it's for, 18 to 34, 5-year-olds, and how it works. So as you can see, theirs is more sort of fun to go with the brand. Who's it for? You could do something like this, where you've got individual sections or pages for individual personas, if you like. But this is where, visitors will identify themselves as one or one of your particular identified user types. So this is why this is important. And you would have seen, lots of different examples like this. So you're breaking it down into individual user cases, if you like, segment-specific user cases. Okay, so the other things that you might want to include in your below the fold section are, of course, testimonials and case studies. Even worst case, if you only have 3 testimonials, 2 testimonials, make sure they're there. And you can also try and identify testimonials or case studies that address individual personas' needs. So where you might have 3 or 4, 3 different personas, for example, you could potentially have 3 testimonials from those different types of customers. Social signals. So this is where you want to include the ability on your homepage for likes and follows and shares, but also you could have feeds. So you could have your Instagram feed or some other feed, or your latest blog posts. Okay, so below those, you would then have the footer. Now the footer is important because it allows you to offload a lot of the links that you might otherwise have in the main heading, main navigation, and put it more into the footer navigation. So these are some of the things you could include in your footer navigation. So your policy documents, for example, contacting you documents, your address, your physical address, links to social pages. Now, some of these are essential. They're, you know, terms of service for organizations like Google and Facebook to have these on your pages. So privacy policy is essential. So really important thing to ensure you've got all of those details in your footer. So an example of what a footer, this is a serious one, but you know, you've got a little menu here with sign up, request a demo, or sign in, how it works, features, why them, a bit about the company, some free tools to use, got resources, you've also got the copyright, terms and conditions, and all of their social links. So, you know, otherwise you would have to have a lot of this in your main navigation, and your main navigation should be about achieving those objectives. So getting them to get to the next stage in your funnel, essentially. Okay, so let's talk about some other tools you might want to just use on your homepage. So this is where you want to make sure that you've got email marketing set up. So an email marketing platform, because, so let's give you a scenario. Someone visits your website, they don't follow any of your actions, they don't do any of your call to actions, your primary or your secondary, and then they leave. So this is a chance to maybe at some point grab their email address, if that's the case, and that might be one of your call to actions. But if it's not, you could have a pop-up, for example, have an embedded form on your website, or a pop-up as they're leaving or well before they leave to try and grab their email address in exchange for whatever it could be a newsletter, it could be a club of some sort, membership, could be incentives like discounts or free shipping, could be a range of different things, some sort of lead magnet, something you could offer them in exchange. So that's very important. So that's, if they leave your website, you've still got their email address to do some marketing to them. Also, the other thing you might want to consider is retargeting. So this is where they've done no call to actions. They haven't opted in for any of your email marketing, but you can still target them through retargeting. So they visited your website, they might have looked at some products. You can then target them on Facebook with the Facebook pixel retargeting, or on other websites using Google retargeting. So definitely something you might want to consider. Okay, I'm running a bit short of time, so I'm going to quickly flick through a few of these other things. I did touch on it briefly. You do want to make sure you invest in very good quality images. I need to change this image I have here myself because that's not a very good one. But you need to, because it imparts a lot of things, and particularly trust. So you want to make sure you've got high quality images. And if you do need some where you don't necessarily have them, but you could get them from a photo library, maybe Unsplash or Pixels are a good choice. You still need to attribute the photographer, but you don't need to pay for the photo, or you could use a stock image library. You need to make sure you've optimized your website on your homepage for mobile users, because like I've talked about already, they're going to comprise a big chunk of your users, and Google and other search engines will prioritize those over others. So you need to make sure that it is mobile friendly, and you can do things like use that mobile viewing option that you can see in the design view when you're designing on your platform, so you can switch between mobile and desktop. Also design for fat fingers, don't make tiny menus, but also little images and very small fonts, difficult to read on mobile devices. So don't use pop-ups, like I said before, on mobile if you can turn them off on mobile and delay them so they're not in the above the fold section. And you need to optimize your images if they're too large, and you can do that on a range of different online platforms. This Tiny JPEG, for example, is one of them. And try your site on on your own, or maybe not on your own mobile, because it's, well, not for performance anyway, but at least to see how friendly it is, how easy it is to navigate, for example. And you can use the Google mobile friendly test as well. Just briefly talk about site structure. It's really important because it's going to, do a number of things. It's going to give you your content structure around which you can then write your content for optimization, SEO, optimizing your website for search engines. So that's going to give you your content structure and your topics, if you like, that you'll then write your content around. And it gives your home pages better chance of ranking. So for example, what I mean by that is, just using this as an example of a typical, this is a PC website, retail website. They've got two different types of computers, desktop, laptops, and then underneath those, they've got Windows, and in this case, Apricot computers. So each of those levels hierarchy will add authority to the page above and all the way up to the home page. So in this particular website, the home page is the authority for all types of computers, whereas the category page here is the authority for desktop, and this is for laptops. So this is really important from just an SEO authority perspective too. It also makes it easy for your whole website to be crawled and makes it easier for your users to navigate your site. So I just want to talk briefly about SEO. SEO is really important because if you think about keywords, it's the way that Google will match your website to a search query. So if you someone's searching for something and that search term's not on your website, then it's going to be very difficult for you to rank for that particular search term. So what you need to do for your homepage is to really think about how you can identify some keyword phrases, so 3 or 4 or 5 word phrases, and use them to build content on your homepage. Sounds really relatively simple, but you need to use it consistently. So, in the title of the homepage, in the copy, the text of the homepage a couple of times, in the alt image tags, in the meta description, meta title. So there's 5 places you need to put it essentially, or a few more than that, but essentially that's it. And you've optimized your page for that particular search term. You also need to, where possible, provide links to other parts of your website from your homepage. So it might be to other pages through navigation, could be through products or categories, through showing those on the homepage, blog posts, for example. Now, I'm just going to talk about how you could identify what long tail keywords or keywords you could use. We call them long tail keywords because they're more than one phrase. They're 3 or 4 word phrases, because they're going to be the words that are more likely you're able to rank for. So you need to try and identify longer tail keywords. So, in this particular case, rather than t-shirts, you might choose blue t-shirts, or even better, it could be blue cotton Australian made t-shirts, for example. Or if you're a builder in Mount Barker, it should be Mount Barker Home Builder. Or if it's a product page, it could be floral cotton summer maxi dress, or even a brand name, for example, as opposed to just dress. And if you're a service-based business, it should be something like you know, the feature of your service, what type of service, and maybe a location. So a small business account in Perth, for example. And then what you would do is you try and use this site structure that we talked about and the keywords that you've chosen to write some content around your site on your homepage. So on all your pages, but because we're just talking about your homepage, we're going to use a specific keyword for each page, but for your homepage, you've identified that and you've decided that, okay, this is the one I'm going to use. You would then put it into the title, the URL, the body, and the image. So image tag a couple of times in the body text, in the URL, and in the title of your page. And, you know, use a couple of variations. That would also be fine, that people might also be searching for, and you might have services in relation to those. And then you could also have links to those pages. So links are also very important. So it's relatively straightforward. I'll just show you a couple of things though, the jargony things. So meta title is that blue thing that comes up in a search result, and the meta description is the paragraph underneath that. So you can easily add these to your website. Most of the time, I mean, you will need to add code to your head section of your HTML, but if you've got a platform like WordPress or Shopify or Wix or Squarespace, you can do that just within the platform itself. So in this particular case, it's Wix, and you can see under SEO Google, I can change the URL, the title, and the description. So that's your meta title, and that's what will show in search results. In Google, in WordPress, in this case, I'm using a plugin called Yoast, and that allows me to edit that snippet, and I can change that. Same with Shopify, it's at the bottom of every Shopify page that you edit, or any product that you edit will include that edit website SEO. So you could put things on there like free shipping, you know, you put a space, usually a dash, free shipping, you know, sale on now, whatever salesy type thing you might want to put on search engines, but maybe not permanently on your page. So that's what a meta title and a meta description is. So it's about attracting traffic to your website. Now you'd also do the same for your alt image tag. So this is getting the keyword and putting it in the alt text section of your images. So on most platforms, when you edit the image, you'll be able to add the keyword to those and make it as descriptive as possible, So use as much of that real estate as you can. And almost there, just finally, I'm just going to talk about links. Links are really important because with Google, so keywords are important, performance is important, and links are important. Those three things. If you can get some links pointing to your homepage, it's going to help you big time. So there's a few things to do. I've talked about internal links. I'm not talking about that really now. I'm talking about external links. So these are links from other websites to your page. And these could include anything like industry sites, authoritative type industry sites, blogs in your industry, but also your social pages. They should all have a link to your homepage. But there's also things called citation sites, and I'll just show you those. And they are available. There's a list of these available in the resources that I provide in that folder that's in the chat. And you can get those and just submit your business to each of those with your website URL. Things like True Local, Local Search, Yellow Pages, word of mouth, they all sort of help improve your rankings, particularly for your homepage. So there are a few things you can work on. Sorry, I took a little bit longer than an hour. Thank you for your time. If you do want some additional resources, there are those resources there that are in that chat that I talked about. And you've also got my email address there. If you have any questions, you're also welcome to send me an email anytime, and I'll be happy to answer that or try and help you out. Okay, thank you guys. So I hope you got some value out of that. And I'm just going to leave that up there for a little bit so you can get some, take that down. And I would recommend trying to go through some of those resources I provide there, particularly the persona, and that'll then enable you to flesh out all of the other things I spoke about. Okay, well, thank you for your time. I'm just going to stop sharing now, and then I'll just make sure you've got those links before I stop sharing. And thank you for your time. Bye, everyone.